We all love a good tips and hacks video, and so in this one I've compiled a bunch that I think you're going to find quite useful and you can implement into your workflow. Some of these I've been doing for quite some years, and there's some of them that I picked up just recently, but nonetheless, let's get straight into it. So let's say you want to run some wiring through a tube, but the tube's not straight. This is my motorcycle frame. I want to put the tail light wiring inside the actual frame itself. As long as you have access to both sides, this will work perfectly. Grab yourself some string line, even some twine, or possibly even some dental floss might work. And as a bonus tip, if you're drilling hole into metal and you're trying to contain the metal swarf, simply put a really strong magnet inside a bag, and that way all the metal swarf will get stuck to the magnet, and when you're trying to get it off the magnet, you just simply pull it out of the bag and it'll all fall in the bin. Now grab your string of choice and give yourself plenty of slack. String line will work for most applications, but for what I'm working with, I feel like fishing line has always worked better for me because it's quite smooth on the outside, not fibrous, and therefore it travels through that pipe a lot smoother. Grab a vacuum cleaner and switch it on. And then it's just a matter of attaching the fishing line to the wire or wires that you're going to pull through the tube, and away you go. And here's another really cool trick so you never have to worry about cross-threading another nut or bolt. I've been doing this for years, it's so simple. So let's say you're putting a bolt into a hole. Instead of just going at it and then maybe it's going sideways and you could possibly cross-thread it, try doing it in reverse until you hear a click, just like that. And it works exactly the same if you're putting a nut on a bolt. Just go in reverse until you hear that click. Bam. No more cross-threading nuts or bolts. And speaking of nuts and bolts, let's say you have a thread and it's too long, you want to cut it down a little bit, rather than just going at it with your grinder and just cutting a straight line across, thinking it's straight, and then it ends up being on a funny angle slightly, and then you can't get the nut on the end because it just won't go. And once you know how much thread you want to cut off, put one nut on and then put a second nut on top of that. Going in reverse, obviously, to start with, like I mentioned earlier. And if you have a bench vise, it makes it a lot easier to hold for you. Put it in your bench vise, cinch up the end nut so it doesn't come loose, and then you can cut against the end nut, which will give you a nice straight line. And once you remove that end nut, it'll come off perfectly and you can just file down the burr. So here's a tip about grinders, or should I say the cutting discs that go on the grinders you may or may not know. This is a 1mm steel or stainless steel cutting disc, and if you try and cut aluminium with it, it's going to make an absolute mess. But if you simply add some wax, which comes like this, onto the blade, you can cut aluminium and it works quite well. I use it all the time. It is recommended to get the proper aluminium blade, but in a pinch, it'll do. So when it comes to grinding, and this is especially the case on the thinner materials like sheet metal, and if you have a weld that you want to grind down, don't just grab the flapper disc and start grinding, because what will happen is you'll end up taking down the top of the weld, but because it's flexible, you'll also push really hard and start taking out the parent metal as well. Always start with a grinding disc first, start taking down the top of the weld as much as you possibly can before you start touching the parent metal, and then you can finish off with a flapper disc, and that is the best way to do it. So you don't end up with something that looks like corrugated iron at the end of it. And did you know you can now buy flapper discs with notches cut out of them so you can actually see through the disc and see what you're actually grinding? They're fantastic. You could probably make your own, but it's not something I would really recommend. Another really good one that some people struggle with is trying to join two pieces of steel or timber together like this, and you may be working on an uneven ground so you don't have a fabrication table to lock everything in. This will work if it's miter cut or it's straight cut. Place the two pieces together, grab yourself a little offcut, just something square, place it on the inside corner, use one clamp on one side and just pretty much lightly clamp it. Just allow enough room for the second clamp to go in, and then once you pull in that second clamp, you know that that's going to be hard up against the inside here. You can run your tacks, just make sure before you weld it, you run a ruler over the top to make sure it is perfectly level, and then you are good to go and you can do all four corners, make yourself a gate or whatever you're making. Same process applies if you're trying to put two boards together like this. It can be very difficult to hold that while you pre-drill it so it's a perfectly flush edge so you don't end up with it being all skew-if like this. Place your offcut behind. First clamp on, just loose, allowing enough room for the second clamp. Once the second clamp goes on, it'll hold it in place. You can pre-drill it, put your screw in, flip it over and do the other side. And here's a great way to cap a piece of steel like this, especially if you have quite a few to do. Rather than cutting a square piece of plate, put it on and then weld it up, grind it off. Try finding a piece of square tube that fits on the inside. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just find it as close as you can, cut it to the length of the inside diameter of this, and then just push it in place. It'll hold it there while you put one little tack, just making sure that you do check for square both ways, and then you can fully weld it, grind it up, and it looks amazing. And here's a cool little trick for these little orbital sanders with the dust extraction holes and the Velcro discs, and trying to line those holes up sometimes can be just a mission. You do it like 4 or 5 times to try and get it. Get yourself a couple of little wooden dowels, or in my case, I'm gonna use these little wall plugs. Just jam them in 2 of the holes, just like that. And then you know you're going to locate those in the right spot every single time, just like that. So this is a useful one that I've used many times myself. Let's say you wanna find a straight line along that pipe or tube, whatever it is. You're trying to get a straight line with your Sharpie and it's just kind of all over the place. From one end to the next, it's kind of a little bit out. The easiest way to do it is grab yourself a piece of angle, slam that piece of angle on there like so, because it'll sit perfectly flat on the actual pipe, and then you can just run your Sharpie across it like that. And let's say, for example, you want to do a line on both sides that's perfectly even on both sides. Work out the diameter of the tube or pipe, get yourself something that is half that, place that on the side. You just have to remember to clamp it down to something that's a flat surface. For example, this bench here, if I clamped it down, place this on the side, and then you can run your Sharpie along one side, flip it over, and then you can put that on the other side as well. And then you'll have a reference point on both sides of the pipe that's perfectly even. If you only have a short piece of pipe like this and you don't have a piece of angle, making sure you use a piece of tape on your door, you can always just use your door frame. It'll do exactly the same thing, giving you that perfect line all the way through. Or perhaps you have some pipe that you want to do some cuts on. You want to make sure those cuts are perfectly straight, and it's kind of hard to mark with a square. The easiest way to do it is just with a simple piece of paper or thin cardboard, and you just wrap that around the pipe nice and tight and just keep moving it around until you see those 2 pieces of paper lined up. Once you do that, make your mark, and then it's only up to you to cut on that straight line with your grinder. This is a great tip for anyone working with nuts and bolts, or even screws for that matter, especially the stainless stuff. If you're working on motorcycles or cars, or you're just trying to assemble something and you can't quite get your hands down there and the screw keeps falling off, check this out. Let me use the front of this motorcycle as an example because it's easy for me to film. And let's say there's a headlight on here and I'm trying to get this stainless steel bolt on this Allen key down in behind and down into this little hole down here, and I can't get my hands anywhere around it. The thing that ends up happening is you try multiple times and then you end up dropping it. It hits 3 things along the way, rolls across the floor just like that 10mm socket, and you can never find the damn thing. And the easiest solution to this is just grab yourself some painter's tape or even electrical tape. Will do the same thing. Just get yourself a little piece and then just punch a small hole. And then that way you can put that straight over the top of the screw like so. And then you can put your Allen key on and you can fold it back onto the Allen key, keeping it in place, and it's never going to fall off. And this will work on pretty much any bolt or screw that you can imagine. It's just the same process, just push it over and then you have somewhere for the screwdriver, for example, to lock on. Or if you're worried about the tape getting stuck in the hole and you can't ever get your fingers in there to get it out again, another really great option, and this is fantastic for sockets, for example, if you have a small bolt that you're trying to get in there and the thing just keeps falling out, a great way to do that is just with a piece of paper towel. Get a small piece of paper towel, fold it in half, and then just put that between the socket and the actual bolt itself and press it in place, and that way it's never going to fall out. You can trim around the edge if you want to be able to see what you're doing, and that thing is going to stay in there no matter what you do. And I find this one quite handy, especially for nuts, because sometimes you can't quite get your hands in there to turn the thing. So all you do is put a piece of paper towel between the nut and the socket, push it in hard. You can fold that paper towel over as many times as you want. You can even trim this just so you can see what you're doing. And there you go. The thing's never going to come out until you actually want it to come out. If you have some bolts like this that you want to do up and use a socket and attach your drill to the socket, but you don't actually have the attachment which looks like this, or possibly you have one but you've misplaced it, there is an easy way to make one. Just grab your socket and put a bolt through in the opposite direction, and then jam a nut on the back and tighten that up nice and tight, and then you have yourself the perfect tool to attach to your drill. But just be mindful, if you do decide to do it this way, to get that nut back off again, if you really bite down hard with the chuck, you may end up destroying the thread, and so therefore you'll just have to chop right there in order to get that nut off, and then you can get the bolt out. If there's anything you're trying to protect from the elements, perhaps it's outside, or maybe it's an axle covered in grease, or perhaps even threads, or even a cover for something that you want to keep protected. Try this. Just grabbing a bottle like this and cut it in half. And you can use both ends of the bottle, it doesn't really matter. Just put it over the thing you want to protect and simply grab yourself a blowtorch like this. There you have it, you have a nice protective cover which you could easily cut off if you want, or you can trim it down so you can keep reusing it. And you just obviously choose a bottle that's the right size for the object that you're trying to protect. So let me know out of all those hacks which one you found the most useful, and if you have any more, please put them in the comments. I would love to see them. I've got plenty of videos just like this one, including this WD-40 hack, which I suggest going checking out next.